Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Martin. It's my pleasure to be your host for today's webinar. This is a webinar in our ongoing Etsy Expert series where we connect you with successful Printify and Etsy merchants so you can learn from them. You can learn from their successes, learn from their failures, pick up all sorts of tips. Today, we are joined by Terra Dime. Terra, hello. How are you today?
Wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. This is going to be wonderful. I'm excited for what you have to share. Before we get into what Terra has to share with our audience today, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Today's webinar will be moderated by our moderators, Kristups and Sarang. So if you have any questions, please put those into the live chat. And just so we get started, I'd love to hear where all of you are joining us from. So if you could put into the chat right now, your state, your province, your city, wherever it might be. It's a truly international affair that we have here. So it's always nice to hear, just to see where everybody is joining us from. So go ahead and put that into the chat right now. Okay. Also, we will be having a trivia question based on the information that we cover in today's webinar. So at the end, pay attention to the topics that are covered. Terra will be we'll have a trivia question. The first 3 correct answers into the chat will win $50 of Printify sales credit. So pay attention, everybody, and stay tuned to the end. And speaking of the end, at the very end, we will be having a downloadable PDF link putting that into the chat where you can download all of the sites and tools and stuff like that is mentioned throughout the webinar. So stay tuned for that as well, so you can have that for your use. But okay, wow. Terra, you are a very unique merchant and you have a wonderful story to share, specifically because you do this full time and you operate multiple print-on-demand stores. So let's start at the beginning. Share with our audience, please. How did you get started? What's the story? Tell us your journey to print on demand.
Sure. I think I probably started print on demand the same way a lot of other people have recently started print on demand. I still am very much, I consider myself a noob to the industry, but I'm a very fast learner. So, but about a year and a half ago, shortly after the year happened in 2020. I think we all remember the year. Shortly after that started, we lost 2 of our businesses that were very people-oriented businesses. And unfortunately, they weren't sustainable from home. And so I ended up frantically trying to figure out how to pay bills, pay rent, get more income coming in. And of course, I'm a big YouTube person. And so I found a whole bunch of people on YouTube that were talking about ways to make money at home. And print on demand really caught my eye because I've already done a lot of things that I already had a lot of knowledge in a lot of areas for print on demand. Not the actual print on demand, but like SEO and marketing and branding. That's all stuff that I knew. And Etsy, I've been on Etsy for a long time. So it was a really easy transition for me. So yeah, I started listening to tools that they used, and Printify was one of them. And so I jumped headfirst into trying to figure out what you're supposed to put on a t-shirt that people actually want to wear. So that's kind of how I got started.
Okay, so you were able to combine your skills pre-pandemic and adapt them to the post-pandemic world, and sort of found an area in which you could thrive and learn and get into with low startup costs. So absolutely wonderful. So where did you learn specifically? How did you learn about POD? Where did you learn the design fundamentals, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in that download at the end that everyone's going to get at the end, I've also included a few of my favorite places where I've learned, but specifically where I learned print on demand were from other YouTubers like Ryan Hogue or Shimmy Morris. The POD cast is one of my all-time favorites. You can listen to it on your iPhone or watch it on YouTube or wherever you are. It's one of my all-time favorites. Those people are the ones that put me through POD school in a couple of months. And I'm still in POD school. I listen to them every day. I learn every day because things are always changing, So that's specifically where I started learning how to do a lot of what I do. Design-wise, same thing. There are a lot of places where you can learn. If you're not a designer, you have multiple different options that I learned, because I came into this like everyone else thinking, I can't draw a stick figure. How am I going to put things on t-shirts? How am I going to make things that people want to wear? There are so many different methods that you can use, whether you learn how to draw or whether you learn how to put graphics that have already been drawn together with Canva, or whether you use pre-made graphics that are for commercial use from people who are designers. There's so many different avenues. So yeah, I started learning. I specifically decided to start learning design because artistry kind of runs in my family. So I decided to start learning that. And yeah, so I learned, there was I should have put her, I'll put her name down on the download, but there is a specific artist that teaches you how to draw really beautiful things. I use an iPad and a $10 app called Procreate. That's what I use to design all of my stuff. Procreate is on the list already, but anyway, she shows you how to design using Procreate or a very similar app, if you wanted to have something else. But Procreate's $10, super easy to get started on. If you've already got an iPad, you're good to go.
Okay, so good. These tools are out there. They're available, and there's no shortage of information to that you can use to learn. And I like to say, if you're starting out, make YouTube and Google your best friend, because there is a sea of information. However you like to consume it, it's available. So make yourself a student of that and find it out there. So wonderful. So you got into it, you did your design homework and started out. Wonderful. So can you tell us a little bit about how Printify is your go-to solution and how Printify helps you make it all work?
Absolutely. So I have tried others. Printify was not the first one I tried. I was like taking all of the tools that people were telling me online and trying them all. And Printify is the one that I stuck with for a lot of different reasons. And in fact, when you look at that list at the end of this, you're going to see Printify in almost every single section, because the PDF is broken down into sections of design, research, marketing. Printify is in almost every one of those sections for me. Printify has become a coworker and not necessarily so much a tool. Obviously still a tool, but you guys have become a coworker for me, because when I need help, when I'm having a customer service issue in Etsy or any one of my other stores, I come to you guys, and you guys usually have me help me solve that within 5 minutes. And I'm sorry, but in Etsy or in any other system, customer service is number one. That is the number one thing. And if I am on my own, I can still do it, but that's going to be 10 times harder than if I've got someone who can help me work through the issue with my customer, which I absolutely adore. That's one of my favorite things about Printify is the customer service. I love the fact that I can submit my design. And if something happens with my printer, like we all remember, if you were in print on demand a year ago, there was a huge shortage of white shirts. There was a huge shortage of, a whole bunch we were having overseas issues because of COVID. So it was amazing that I could go in there and easily just reroute it to another designer, reroute it to someone else, and that was a big learning process for me last year. But I think Printify helped me through that learning process. They helped me through the learning process instead of being like, oh my God, what do I do? Where do I print? What do I do? And I'm stuck with this one printer that doesn't have any of these things. I had 20 different printers to choose from. One of them is going to have a white shirt. You know what I mean? Wow. So you guys are my problem solvers. You guys are my organization. You guys are my design process, because I can easily take one design and see what it's going to look like on 500 different things. So, yeah, I love you guys.
and it's our pleasure to partner with merchants like you that are so active, running all these different stores and doing a lot of that heavy lifting behind the scenes, so that you can focus on that stuff that is most important, which is growing your business, operating your store, and really providing that customer service. Like, can you just go a little bit in depth on how important customer service is to growing a successful POD store?
It's the most important thing. You can have an okay design and you will sell that design. It's just, someone will like that design. But with customer service, the second you do something wrong and don't own it, that your store immediately is a 1 to 2 star to 3-star store in the mind of somebody else. People right now it's the Amazon model. People are looking for 5-star customer service. They're looking for, I want it my way, I want it the best. And they are willing to go on your website and tell you the second that they are not happy with one tiny thing. And so customer service, in I would say, in my opinion, but I would say is fact, is the first and most important thing. If someone gets an amazing customer experience, they're going to give you 5 stars. You know, even if the product, I've had plenty of times where in the thousands of things that we've shipped out, where I've had one thing that hasn't printed right, or there's been an issue with the garment, or it didn't arrive because of USPS, you know, something. It's very rare that it happens, but it does happen. And the second that happens, I own it. I don't care. I don't care if it was my printer's issue. I don't care. You know, it's my fault that this happened to them. I am the line of contact. So my ability to be able to serve them as the customer, that's what I do. You know, yeah, I design things, but I could stop designing tomorrow and my job would still be customer service. Like that is what the print on demand industry is customer service first, print later, print second.
Exactly, because that's going to help you build relationships with your customers. I mean, I've said it a million times on these webinars, is that POD by its very nature is impersonal because we don't get to see our customers face to face. So right. Providing that sort of next level customer service is crucial if you want today's customers to also be tomorrow's customers, and focusing on that and making that a priority, I think is key to any POD merchant success. So okay. So good. Let's kind of shift gears here and talk a little bit about the products that you sell. Everybody out there, regardless of where they are on their POD journey, is curious about what products to sell, how to sell them, et cetera. So if you can just take us through your process, I'm sure that'd be great.
Yeah. So when I first started, I wanted to do what I'm one of those people that's like, everyone's doing it, so I don't want to. So I'm just like, naturally, that was at one point I was like, everyone's reading Harry Potter, so I'm not going to. And now it's like the best thing I've ever read in my life. So one thing when I first started was I wanted to try a whole bunch of different stuff. I wanted to try mugs. I wanted to try posters. I wanted to be really niche on one product. And in the end, I landed on what everyone else really lives. And there, don't get me wrong, mugs sell like crazy. Posters, I actually sell a lot of posters, but I've only got like 4 or 5 listed. But in the end, I wanted to be able to put one design on multiple products in order to create more listings, more visibility, and to save time. If you are just doing t-shirts, that's fine. That's great. But that means that in order to get to 500 listings, you're going to have to do 500 designs. Mm-hmm. Whereas in my case, I'm almost 500 listings on one store. I'm about 600 listings on the other store. I've got 100 listings on another store that I just recently started. And the way I do that is because I can take one design and put it on a Bella Canvas 3001, a Gildan 18,000, so a sweatshirt, a t-shirt, and then a Bella Canvas tank. I love the Bella Canvas because they're super soft. And my industry, what I sell in is vintage and retro. And so I want to make sure that the tees are super soft, kind of like that shirt that you steal from your dad when you're like 15 and don't give back because it's super, super comfy and soft and thin and comfy. So that's what I go for. I make sure my product design matches my actual physical product as much.
Sure. And you just touched on our first Etsy tip of the day, which is putting up multiple listings and stuff like that, staying fresh, everything like that. That's if you're not doing that to grow your Etsy store, you're doing yourself a disservice. And I promise you, we're going to get into some more of these tips later on in the webinar. So stay tuned. Plenty of more Etsy tips to come because Tara's got a few good ones. Okay. But you mentioned something there while talking about your products that I want to circle back to is your niche. Finding your niche. Can we kind of explore that and exactly how you settled on your particular niche?
Absolutely. So I mentioned before that I've done Etsy for a really long time. POD is new. Etsy is old hat for me. I've been around the Etsy block for a long time. And one of the things that I did for the longest time in Etsy was as a reseller. So obviously that was one of the businesses we were doing really well in it. But when COVID hit, I couldn't source anything new. I couldn't go to Goodwills or antique shops or thrift stores. I couldn't do anything like that anymore. So I was just kind of twiddling my thumbs, not putting up anything new, and it wasn't growing. And that is, again, a tip we just talked about a second ago. You have to, in Etsy, you have to be putting up something new every day. Just put up at least one thing. But with vintage, the reason I did it was for money, but the more primary reason I did the vintage stuff was because I love vintage. I've been thrifting with my mom since I was a kid. We have thrift stores down the street that I would literally, if I'm killing time, I will just go in and thrift for like 20 minutes for no apparent reason whatsoever, other than I just love it. I love the history behind things. I love learning about things that I didn't know existed in time periods that I wasn't alive for. It's just fun. So when I went to start my print on demand business, I initially started it in an industry that I did not know. I initially, like at the time, politics was rampant, and I saw people making a lot of money in political t-shirts. And so I tried that, but I don't really follow politics. I mean, I have my opinions. Don't get me wrong. I'm in America, so I definitely have my opinions. But I'm not a political, I don't pay attention to every single news story that's happening. So I really quickly realized that the most I could do was follow the lead of other people who were already doing that thing. I couldn't be the beginning of a thought process with politics. And so I started slowly like looking at my own wardrobe, looking at, again, those t-shirts that I stole from my dad when he was 15, looking at old pictures of my family when they were in the 70s and 60s and 50s and what they were wearing, paying attention to Pinterest, because the second you start pinning things on Pinterest that you love, they show you a slew of other things that you love. And so I started realizing my Pinterest feed already looked like one big massive commercial from the early 1900s. Like all I was getting was, old gasoline advertisements and old grocery store advertisements and how to put your casserole in the oven advertisements from like the 1950s. Like that's what I was getting because I love that aesthetic. And so I started realizing that that would actually translate really well in some aspects to t-shirts and to posters and to anything, posters, that's a totally different topic. We won't go on that, but tees, tanks, and sweatshirts, it's really fun to find things that translate really well and also evoke an emotion with your customer. And I think that's huge. If you can evoke some kind of emotion, whether it's happiness or nostalgia or anger because it's a political shirt or whatever, that's why they buy. They don't buy because they're like, oh, I like the color of that. Like, they don't do that. They buy because it's a t-shirt and people are walking billboards with t-shirts. They want to be able to spread whatever message you're giving them on that t-shirt. That's the whole point of a t-shirt. It's a walking billboard.
Exactly. That sort of personal connection is what is going to cause them to pull the trigger and buy from you rather than from somebody else. So basically, in selecting your niche, you were able to take the passion that you have for vintage designs and translate that into a working POD business and putting out designs that are of interest to you and targeting the market that is of interest to you. I mean, you would be your own ideal customer. So already you're starting ahead of the game by having all this knowledge of, hey, if I would like to buy, this design on a shirt, chances are somebody else that has the same sort of passion and for vintage designs would also want to buy that shirt. So you're already starting ahead of the game. So
I own more than a few of my own designs.
Exactly. And I think that's important for our viewers at home to know, is that if you're going to select a niche, choose something that you're already interested in, because you already have that background and it's just that much easier to get yourself started and get yourself going. Okay. Yeah. So wonderful. Yeah. And especially if you're going to be spending all day doing this, full time, you might as well spend it doing something that interests you, right?
I do not even want to imagine where my brain would be if I was still trying to follow Putin and all of the things that are happening. I mean, I'm following it, but I'm not designing for it.
Exactly. Yeah. Nobody wants to spend all their time doing that. Although we did talk a little bit about politics, and if that's your niche, more power to you. I'm
happy for you. My brain is not that space.
So. Exactly. And that tip about Pinterest, if you're just on Pinterest looking at the stuff you like, then it works as an idea tool by creating that feed and bringing all that stuff to you every time that you're on there. So I think that's also wonderful to get across. Okay, so let's just touch quickly on, since we're talking about designs, the tools that you use to design with.
Yeah, so I mentioned it already. I use an iPad. I've actually got it here. I'll pretty much always got it with me. I've got an iPad. I do have an Apple Pencil, but it's something that I didn't start with. When I started drawing, I actually bought a $30 pencil off of Amazon that worked perfectly for what I needed it for in the beginning. And then a dog chewed it, so I decided to upgrade. Um, and then I use a $10 app on the store, and it's $10 one time. It's not $10 a month. It is flat out fee $10. It's called Procreate, and it is honestly one of the top designing apps that most digital artists use. So don't let the price tag scare you. For some reason, it's just got a real good price tag on it, but it's intense. It's a great little program. And again, I'll put a link to the one who taught me how to use Procreate. I'll put that in that PDF so everyone can have that link as well. And she's a YouTuber, so it's totally free. She just teach you everything on YouTube. Again, everything I did was at a very low price point because I didn't have much money to get started with at all. I didn't have any money to get started with at all. So that's pretty much what I use to design. My bigger parts of design are definitely 100% Pinterest. Every morning I literally spend probably 30 minutes just waking up and scrolling through Pinterest and pinning pretty things, because those are what's going to get my day focused and excited and, like enthusiastic about what's coming for the day. Okay. And then, of course, the other tools that I use are going to be Canva. One of my new favorites is a company called Kittle. I've included that in a PDF as well. They specifically are for vintage retro designs. So if you want to take a hand at that and you're not a designer, that's a great place to start. So yeah, those are probably my top ones. And I've included in the PDF a couple of more companies that I use for getting elements, getting, additional inspiration. Those are all in the PDF, but I would say Kittle, Canva, and Procreate and Pinterest are the 4 places where that's where my brain just explodes with creativity and excitement for design.
Okay. And to wrap up this sort of design and theme portion of today's webinar, I just want to ask you a very simple question. How important is having a very consistent design and a very consistent theme to your store? How important is that?
Very important, but not at the beginning. Okay. I would say very important. The goal is to end up with a store that someone goes, oh, I recognize that. I recognize this design. This is probably Terra or someone who's very similar or copying, one of the two. That's the goal. You want people to recognize your stuff. You want people to know that they can come back 3 months later and find another really cool short shirt right up their alley. That's the goal. Yeah. The reason I say not in the beginning is because you're not going to start off, unless you're already an artist, you're not going to start off knowing your style, knowing what people, even if you are an artist, there's a huge difference between putting something on a poster or an art print and putting something on a t-shirt. You can't wear most posters on a t-shirt. It just looks funky and very boxy, and that's not what a lot of people like. So learning to design for t-shirts and sweatshirts and clothing is a much different ball game. So you're going to have to throw some spaghetti at the walls to figure out what your customers like, what you like. I think that's hugely important. So yeah, I think in the beginning, it's okay if your store looks a little bit crazy because you can always go back and redesign something that didn't quite, that in retrospect, you're like, yeah, that's kind of ugly. So you can go back and redesign that pretty easy, but see what sticks, figure it out, figure out what you like and what you don't like. Because I can tell you the first 20, 30 designs that I put up, I've looked back and I'm like, I should just full on delete everything. Even if it's just a draft, I should just delete that because it makes me cringe on the inside, because there's been a lot of improvement since then.
Well, that's a very important point to get across is in establishing your niche and finding out exactly what your customers want to buy. You're going to have to do a lot of trial and error. You're going to have to try this. You're going to try that as a product. You're going to try this as a design and learn from your mistakes, find where the winners are and move forward and sort of double down on what works. And that's kind of one of another great thing about working with Printify is because we have close to 700 products on our site. I mean, and putting up new ones every single week. So depending on what your niche is looking for, I mean, if you have the designs already, great, no problem. Put them up on a new product, see if they sell. I mean, we've got stuffed animals now. We've got all over print swimming trunks. I mean,
I was going to say my favorite one is still the underwear.
Yeah, exactly. Underwear for, so, but The important thing is that the barrier to entry of new products is super low. I mean, it's not like you got to buy a whole bunch of, stock of stuffed animals and just hope someone's going to buy them. No, it's like, hey, you got your design, put them up for sale. If it sells, great. If not, move on. And at least you learn something,
Yeah. I think one of the biggest tips that I could ever give anybody starting out an Etsy store specifically, or any business, is don't be afraid to be imperfect. Imperfection is what's going to get you farther, because you're going to realize, oh, that's where I'm lacking. That's where I need to pick up the slack. Oh, that's where I'm not good at. I need to find someone else who can help me with that, or learn this skill myself, And so if you start off a business thinking that you're perfect, you're going to fail 100%. No question. You are 100% going to fail.
Exactly. Couple that with a little bit of persistence and you're right where you want to be.
Exactly.
All right. So good. Terra, I mentioned it at the top. You operate multiple print-on-demand stores all by yourself. You do it full time. You're making a go of it. You're making it work. That's, I think, what people want to know about. So how do you do it? What's your secret?
Honestly, I would like to say it's perseverance and it's love for it is all of those things, but more than anything else, it's honestly the technology that I use. Okay. One of my all-time favorite tools, best tool I have ever used in my entire life. I actually used it well before all of this. I've been using it for years. It's called Shift. You can find them at tryshift.com. And essentially what it does is, when you open up a Chrome web app and then for the next few months, 40 tabs live in there and they're all about this big and you can't tell what anyone says and you have to go in and close them every now and then, or you're hunting for that specific thing that you were just on, but then you had to switch. I don't do any of that. So what Shift does for me is basically I have 4 different workspaces, and each workspace is tied to a Gmail account. And each Gmail account is tied to an Etsy store. So one workspace is for one Etsy store. There's another workspace for another Etsy store. And so when I'm doing research or when I'm doing maintenance on the stores, I can switch in between my stores. Super easy. Each one has a different icon. So I can at a glance say, this is my vintage, this is my retro, or this is my retro, this is my non-retro, this is my bookstore. And I can switch back and forth between them. It keeps my mail always open. So I don't have to, it always tells me, you've got 1 mail, 2 mail. You can turn that off if you're one of those people that has 1,000 mails that you never check. And that just stresses you out. You can turn it off. But the other thing that I love is, so that's where all of my store stuff lives. At the bottom, and you'll see this when you see any videos in a walkthrough through Shift, but in the bottom is the app section. So in my app section, and let me know if you can't see me because I just switched screens, but in my app section, I've got an app called Todoist, which keeps my to-do list sunk to my phone and keeps that together. Airtable, which is one of my biggest recommended tools for keeping everything organized, keeping a list of all of your designs and what you've posted. So if you post on numerous products, you want to keep track on what design you've put on what product. That's how I use Airtable. It's also how I keep track of orders, what shipped, financials, all of that fun stuff. I have an entire Amazon app section where I keep all of my Amazon stuff going on. I've got Wix, which is my website that I am in love with and that I partner through Printify with on. YNAB, which is my financial stuff. Printify, which is all of my social media. Point is, when you click on any of these apps, you get the app. So if I click on Pinterest, I'll get my Pinterest screen, but then I can also create a whole bunch of web tabs under that. So that's where I keep all of my social media web tabs. That's where I keep logged into Instagram. Obviously Pinterest. If you have a Facebook group or groups that you join, you can keep those open on that tab. You don't have to have it's basically tab organization on steroids. It's amazing. I cannot tell you enough. I do believe don't quote me on this, but I think it's $100 a year. You'd have to pay yearly for it if I remember right. So yeah, but it's not expensive. It's a little bit of expensive in a lump sum, but it's honestly over time, not an expensive app. I keep Canva open along with all of my designs. So if I want to design something, I can easily switch over to my design tab and have Kittl, Canva, Creative Market, not Upwork, but yeah, anyways, that's my biggest one.
Okay.
I could literally talk the whole time about Shift.
Well, I would love to, but in the context of this webinar, it just sounds like you have found something that works for you and you've made it your own.
Yes. When I wake up in the morning, I have a list under Todoist in Shift. I have a list of everything that needs to get done daily, and it repeats daily. And on that list is upload 3 designs to this store, 3 designs to this store, 3 designs to this store, and then upload stuff to my website, and then upload stuff to a few of my other, print on demand stuff. So when I get up in the morning, I have a whole list of things that repeat every day, and that's hard to keep track of if I have to log in and out of every single store every single time I want to do something, or if I'm doing research for here but I really need to post here and I don't want to get those things confused. Shift is what keeps my brain, the second I'm like, okay, I've uploaded here, instead of getting sidetracked on something, I can just go into the next thing and keep that up, and for later I can say easily, okay, I will do that later, and it doesn't have to live in a whole 500 tab Chrome.
Sure. And speaking of making it easy, for a merchant like you that operates multiple stores, Printify is perfect, because also the order management part of Printify, you can keep all your stores in one account and make it all work, right?
It's lovely. I absolutely love it. I've got everything connected to Printify.
Good.
Literally okay. Everything.
Wonderful. Now I promised everybody some more Etsy tips. So let's go ahead and give the public what they want. Let's talk about your Etsy winners. And you got some good ones. So let's hear it.
One of my favorite ones, and this is one that I discovered, again, been on Etsy for a long time, didn't even think about this, and I kick myself every day for not thinking about it sooner. One of my favorite things to do is to go in and start a sale every single day. What I used to do was start a sale at the beginning of the month, let it run, and then figure out based off of holidays what kind of sale I was going to run next month. No, do it every single day, because what Etsy does is they have a 24-hour countdown timer. The second you've got 24 hours left in a sale, there's a little timer that appears underneath the buy now button that says, the sale ends in 12 hours, the sale ends in 14 hours. And the closer you tick down, when that gets to like 8, 7, 6 hours, people just start buying, because they're like, well, I'm not going to come back in 6 hours. I'm going to be asleep. People will you really start seeing sales pick up towards the evening. I do vary my sales. I like to have 15% one day, 20% another day, 25% on holidays. That way you don't know if you're going to get something. And occasionally I forget to set my sale, and I wake up in the morning and people have purchased things at full price. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, that happened. So it's not, I don't look at it as, I know some people are going to be like, well, it's cheating to always have a sale run. Not if you vary it, not if you pick it up. And besides that, the majority of your customers are going to be one-time customers. A good pocket of them, if you're doing things right, are going to be return customers, but the majority of them are going to be one-time customers. So they're not going to come to your website and think, oh, she's probably been running this sale over and over and over. No, it's the first time they're going to be at your website. They're not going to know. And in addition, like I said, vary it. So if you do have those return customers, they're like, boom, I got 25% this time, not just 15 like I did last time, so mix it up just a little bit.
Well, you're just using the tools that Etsy makes available, so I don't see any harm in that. And I think it's important to also mention, if you're going to run sales like that, make sure you're doing the math that so that the discounts that you're offering aren't going to be too deep, that it's going to come out of your pocket, and that it all makes financial sense. I think
yes, 100%. First thing you do, 100%. Can you do a 25% off?
Good. Okay. Now, we talked a little bit about these sort of multiple stores. I mean, can you let our audience know exactly the process for applying one successful strategy and then replicating that across multiple stores?
Yeah, don't do it in the beginning. Absolutely don't do it in the beginning. When you first start out, at least like I said, your store's going to look crazy. It's going to look like you're some mad person off not knowing what you're doing with your design or with your products. You're going to have mugs, and you're going to have underwear, and you're going to have stuffed teddy bears, because you're trying to figure out what your audience wants and what goes well with your designs. And that's great. That's what you should be doing. You don't want to open multiple stores like that, because that's going to cause a lot of issues later on down the line when you have to go back and correct multiple stores like that. Sure. So what I recommend,
and I think it's just helpful to make clear that we're talking about multiple Etsy stores here.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Definitely check out different print on demand options and things like that. Like as far as like other platforms go, as far as like Wix or Squarespace or whatever you want to use. But what I recommend doing is giving it 6 months. When you get to like 100 sales, just 100, that goes by so fast on Etsy. When you get to 100 sales, you can literally start seeing what people like, what is selling, like what your aesthetic is becoming. You're still not going to be full-fledged at 100 sales because that's how fast it goes, but you're going to feel like you're understanding a little bit more about what you like and what your customer likes, and product wise and design wise. So get to that 100 mark. And then when you have a clear idea of what's working, even if it's just like 3 or 4 designs that are working, start thinking about starting another store. Start thinking, well, could I make a cohesive niche out of this? And that's where we're talking about. The way to open another store is to not just open another store. It's to open another niche store. So the first store that I started was everything. I just started everything. It was called Puddin' Threads. That was it. And then I started putting in that retro stuff that we talked about and doing those retro designs. And I realized that out of everything in the store, that's what was selling. Like nothing else was really, everything else was kind of moving like once a week, twice a week. The retro stuff was like multiples daily. So I was like, okay, that's the thing. So I thought, I want to put my eggs in 2 baskets in case Etsy decides they don't like me for some reason, which they do notoriously. So I wanted to put all of my eggs in a second basket. So I continued to upload to the first store, but I turned the second store into a purely retro vintage store. That's it. That's all that goes in there. I'm very particular about it. And so I started doing that. And then I started realizing that I was selling a lot of stuff based around literature. And I love books. I'm a huge bibliophile. So I started learning that I was selling a whole bunch of stuff based around literature that was okay to do. We're talking old stuff like Les Miserables and, Three Musketeers, stuff that's been in the public domain for a very long time. But people love literature. People love it. So I started doing a third shop just based around literature and public domain literature type stuff. And that started doing really, really well. So it's kind of a combination of vintage and literature at that point. And that's how I started my 3 stores. It was literally figuring out what worked and then slowly niching down for the other 2 stores and the other stores in general that I run.
So start with one store, learn the ins and outs, get good at it, and then apply that successful business strategy to multiple stores. And that's how you can go from the casual side hustler to doing it full-time, just like Terra. Perfect. Yes. Just like that, right?
Amen. Amen.
And with Printify's help, we make it easy and use some of the tools that for time management that Terra mentioned, and you'll be right as rain. And that way you're not spending 16 hours a day doing this. In fact, how many hours a day do you work? I mean, and how do you divide up your time between operating the store and doing product and design research?
Yeah, so it all depends on, so I think it should all depend on your mentality and your happiness factor. So for me, one of the first things I do in the morning is research, because that's what makes me happy. I love getting excited about the thing that I'm going to design next. The rest of the day, probably a good 3/4 of the day is spent doing redundant things. So whether it's entering in all of the sales, making sure, Printify is caught up, making sure, I've added listings to each one of my stores. That's one of my daily things, making sure that I put things on Pinterest. That's all stuff that happens in the middle of the day. Marketing is part of the redundancy thing. So it all happens in the middle of the day. And then in the evening, when I'm like about an hour and a half before it's time to cook dinner or go to the grocery store or whatever, and do what my evening routine, I'll sit down and I'll pick up my iPad and I'll put on, something dumb on YouTube. Usually has nothing to do with work. And by the evening time, I'm like, I don't want to watch anything else. I'm just going to watch Minecraft or something. So I'll put on dumb videos on YouTube and also just sit there and I'll draw and I'll goof off and I'll play. And, it takes me a day or 2 or 3 to come up with a really fun design. But after that, like, it goes on 3 or 4 different items, and I can cross post to different stores with different SEO and different images and,
And all the while providing top-notch customer service, right?
Amen. Oh, that is definitely a part of my day.
Exactly. All right. Well, Terra, wow. This was a lot. And if we can leave our viewers at home with one message when it comes to opening up these multiple shops, I think one thing we want to get across is do this on Etsy, operate multiple stores. Yes. Find out what works, and then there will be a point where you have where you want to take it off Etsy and start like you did a Wix store. And you've already done your research. You know what sells, you know what is selling, what's currently selling. You can take those products right to your Wix store and then enter this sort of next level stuff where you're driving traffic and stuff like that. And that's a whole nother webinar. And maybe we'll get into that at a later date, but it's sort of the natural progression of start to finish to actually, now you're starting to really build your POD empire.
100%. Yep. You couldn't have said it any better. That's literally what it is. Like, you get to a point where the website is important, but it's not important until you know what's going to sell. Otherwise you're spending $30 to $40 a month on a site that's not going to make any money. So you need to know what's going to sell. Do that on Etsy. Etsy is a practically free place to figure out what your customers like. I wouldn't recommend any other platform. I don't think that you should stick with Etsy permanently and just Etsy. I think if you plan on making this a business, spread out, do a whole bunch of different platforms, try to, get your eggs in all the different baskets, because Etsy is notorious for saying one day that, for a reason you may not understand, they just don't like you. Someone could complain about something in your store and then they shut it down. They're notorious for that. So don't put all of your eggs in one basket, but it is a great learning ground, and it's a great second venue of income once you get another one going, like Wix or Squarespace or, any of those wonderful companies.
Exactly. All right. And all the while, Printify is there to support you at every step, right?
Every single step. Good. Literally every step.
Good. Well, Terra, we promised our viewers a trivia question based on the information that we covered today. So if you don't mind, please share with us that trivia question.
Yes. What is the platform that I talked about that literally runs all of my stores? All of them. All of the stores at once, and organizes all of them.
So what is her go-to organizational platform? Put that into chat. The first 3 correct answers will win $50 Printify sales credit. Wow. Okay. Wonderful. And again, here the PDF will be able to be downloaded here in the chat with all those helpful links and all that stuff that Terra mentioned during the webinar. So please avail yourself of that. Wow, Terra, there is a lot of information here. If you want to rewatch this, please, I mean, you're going to have to. So please go to printify.com/webinars, rewatch it, and eventually this will make it onto our YouTube page where it will live in perpetuity, and you can go back and watch it as much as possible. Take the advice that Terra shared with you, apply it. Make the tweaks as necessary for your particular niche to make it work for you, so that you can become a more profitable merchant. Terra, thank you so much for your time. This was wonderful. I appreciate you sharing your tips with our audience. So thank you so much, and goodbye, everybody. And join us for the next Printify webinar. Okay, bye-bye.